I have that recording.
Okay.
Oh, great. Thanks, Aaron.
Well,
All right. It's 11 o'clock. People are rolling in. I'm so glad to see you all. Um, I'd like to just throw it right over to Aaron when he is available because I have a last minute request to join today. So I'm going to kind of go silent, but welcome. We are live at the Fire Museum of Maryland, and oh, you're in for a real treat. Aaron, I'm just going to throw it to you. Thanks again for being here. And Emma and so many other people who are working behind the scenes to make this happen.
that sounds good. And Emma, actually, can you go ahead and get us out of that PowerPoint, just so I can do a little bit of an introduction of myself and all that? All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome virtually to the Fire Museum of Maryland. We're excited to have you all here with us today. Uh, Hopefully, one day we can get you all here in person. At the very least, tell people that you know and get them in here in person. But we're going to have a wonderful time today. We are going to talk about um, the history of firefighting in America. In particular, we get to talk about it both through a PowerPoint and then also through our collection. So you'll see pictures of stuff we have in our collection, and through various points, we will also pause the PowerPoint to view it live. Um, and yeah, it should be a good time. Um, I'm going to ask that you guys either put your questions in the chat if that's enabled, and if not, try to hold off on your questions until I ask if we have any, because we got a good bit to go through. It's a pretty large collection. All right, so Miss Emma, if you could start us actually back to that PowerPoint now. All right. Yeah, we can go ahead and skip that first one. All right, so we have over 40 pieces of firefighting apparatus. Our mission is to interpret the history of the urban fire service in America, which the museum has been doing since 1971. And we kind of, as an updated version of this, we also have it as part of our mission to teach fire safety. We have two annual musters, which is just kind of like really big events where we bring out firefighting apparatus and do stuff with it. One in May and one in September. So that one's coming up pretty soon. Our motor muster on Saturday, September 13th. All right, and if we can go to our next slide, please. All right. So in the beginning, we have Cestibus. I could always be saying that wrong. I'm never quite sure. But he's kind of considered the father of pneumatics, of pumping, if you will. So we have that one pump to the side there, which was an ancient Roman pump found in Spain, but dated back to the Roman era. And so kind of an early form of that. However, it was not used for firefighting. Um, we don't see pumps being used for firefighting to the best of our knowledge until the Great Fire of London. So that one that you're seeing in there that looks a little bit older, I don't believe that's the original. I think it's a replica, but it was they introduced a pumping engine after the Great Fire of London to make sure that sort of thing didn't happen again. And then the bottom right is a fire engine built by Richard Newsom in 1728. Is among the earliest that were imported to the United States. And this is where the story of the fire service in America begins. All right. So we go to our next slide, please. All right. So hand-drawn apparatus. So the earliest fire engines, ladder trucks, and hose carriages were pulled and powered by firefighters. Pistons were manually moved to pump water, and ladders were manually raised, which required hundreds of volunteers because it was so labor intensive. This image is a lithograph from Currier and Ives' famous Life of a Fireman series, which has some great depictions of firefighting in the 1800s. And then Nathaniel Currier, one of the authors of this, or the painter or lithographer, was a firefighter in New York City at that time. All right, so let's go to our next slide, please. All right, so on the top left, we have a gentleman named Pat Lyon. He was born in London in 1769, moved to Philadelphia, to begin making fire engines. So he was the first fire engine maker in the United States. He has learned the practice in um, England and moved to the United States and started doing it here. Line would invent the Philadelphia style of hand pumps, which were an innovation because the upper deck allowed for more manpower to fight fires, and they were also really good at fighting fires in cities because they were narrow. Um, this is depicted in Kieran Ives' lithograph as well. All right, and we're going to go to our next one. All right. So what we see here is a couple of gentlemen that are part of. Oh, sorry, excuse me.
Can I
Um,
interrupt, Aaron? I'm sorry.
yeah.
I'm not seeing any slide. Am I the only one, guys? Oh, there we are. Okay. Anyone else
Okay.
having trouble? Just want to make sure. Good. Okay, thank you.
All right. So here we see a couple other things. We see actually one of our engines, and let's just move this for a second. That the museum collection picks up in 1806. With this Pat Line designed engine, which is the one in the bottom right. Um, and so this lovely pumpkin colored hand drawn fire engine is the oldest in our collection and was constructed by Pat Line. It was used by the Independent Fire Company #2 in Annapolis. In colonial American, all citizens were firefighters, and many communities mandated that each had their own leather fire bucket. The bag frame to the left of the engine is a salvage bag, which was used to save objects from burning buildings. One major disadvantage with early fire engines was their inability to bring water through a rigid suction sleeve. So they had to be supplied by originally by buckets like they were using to put out the fire. This required wooden fire engines to be parked rather close to a burning building, which, as you can imagine, didn't always work out so well. We're going to take a break from the PowerPoint, actually, and we're going to go live for a second. All right. And so what you're seeing here is that hand pump. Once again, our oldest in the collection, built by Pat Line in 1806, the first fire engine maker of the United States. Um, right now, the handles are pushed inward, but these would come outward. Having them pulled inward would allow them for better storage and for better traveling. Um, and then, pulling these to where the fire was difficult as well. You didn't have a lot, you didn't have a big turning radius. And so you had to be very careful about how you got these to where the fire was. But yes, and as you can see, this one's kind of a little bit unusual because it is such an early piece that this is all open. And so you would actually just dump buckets of water inside here, and then you would pump it, and then it would go out through that nozzle in the top. Okay? All right, so if we could go back to our slides, please. And our next one should be a very famous looking gentleman. All right. Who can tell me who this is? We'll take a second and see if anybody can chime in if they want to speak or if they want to put it in the chat. Are you able to see the chat?
Trying.
Sorry. All right. So we're just going forward. You guys may have answered, and we may have just had technical difficulties, but this is Benjamin Franklin. So this is not an accurate depiction of him, though. So the style of fire helmet that we are seeing him wear isn't invented until well after his death. But it's still really cool that we have this. The reason we have this is because Benjamin Franklin creates the first volunteer fire company in the United States. So he gets credit for a whole bunch of other things, but people often forget that he does this sort of thing. So the idea was prior to this was that everybody would fight the fire together, that there was no fire company. Everybody would just fight fires. It was just part of the thing to do as part of your community, which is good. But he said, what if we have a couple people who are really good at fighting fires and who like to do it? And so this is how we kind of come about to have our first volunteer fire company. And they were all going to be volunteers up until the mid 1800s. So we'll cross that bridge in a little bit. So he created Philadelphia's Union Fire Company, which was organized with his help in 1736. And this kind of idea spread throughout the nation very quickly, and that all other major cities would eventually have their own volunteer fire companies. All right, if we can go to our next slide. All right. So like I said, many places followed suit, including Baltimore. So Baltimore followed suit in 1763 with the Mechanical Fire Company. They purchased their first fire engine in 1769. So that's the gentleman you're seeing, the Mechanical Fire Company. They had the motto of Spectormo Agenda, which is Latin for "Let us be judged by our acts." Volunteer fire companies formed to provide a public service and evolved into social organizations. It wasn't just for protection; it ended up being kind of like the thing to do, boys' club, if you will. Um, and a lot of times they would just start to kind of get involved in local politics, but we'll cross that bridge a little bit later. There were 21 volunteer fire companies in Baltimore before they switched to a paid department. This would include Patapsco, Union, Deptford, and Friendship fire companies. These companies became so rowdy and uncontrollable that in 1834, Baltimore United Fire Department, in their own words, as a means of checking and keeping under proper control the emulation existing amongst firemen, which at times have run into excess. It attempted but ultimately failed to control the volunteer fire companies for the next 25 years. The Mechanical Fire Company lives on as a social organization to this day, kind of honoring these early firefighters from Baltimore, but they mostly just kind of hang out every now and then. All right, if we can go to slide number 7, please. Back to the machines. So actually, what you're seeing is not the slide that I'm talking about, but what you're seeing is fire hose being recreated. Um, so early fire hose was actually originally made by leather, and unlike what you're seeing here, it was actually first hand sewn together. And then they quickly realized that the pressure from the fire engine would cause that hose to burst at the seam, and so they started to use leather rivets instead. So what you're seeing right there is actually a leather hose that we actually work on ourselves as a replica, but it's still very cool to check out. All right, if we can go ahead to our next one. All right. So now what we're looking at is that we're going to go back to machines. So explanation of a hose carriage. So the hose carriage is a machine that is used to carry fire hose in this early time period when they were using leather hose with metal rivets in it. And so the idea is that with the leather hose, if it's ever creased at any point, it is going to, well, one, it's going to be creased, and it's also going to be wet because they were using it to fight a fire. So at first, they were just folding it into the back of a wagon. But because of those creases and because it was wet, it started to deteriorate pretty quickly, also from frequent use. And so they realized, though, if you spin it on a big wheel and wind it that way, you're never actually creasing it, which greatly helps to extend the lifespan of the fire hose. So the one that we're looking on right now is you're seeing it in most of its restoration part. That this one is from 1860. Looking at that one, right? Yeah. And so, like I said, that one seems to have some restoration work going on to it. We can go to our next slide. All right, we're going to actually skip this one. Emma, can you go to the next one afterwards? Okay. So this hose carriage was manufactured by Jeffries and Nuttall in 1819. It was used by the Southwark Hose Company of Philadelphia. The upper right image shows the intricate silver plating depicting the muses of Greek mythology. So they started to kind of get really into decorating these fire apparatuses as well as their uniforms in the early 1800s. You might think this is so ornate. Did they actually use this to fight fire? Most of the time, yes. However, for this particular one, that is not the case. This is one is for only parades. They would not actually use this to fight fires, to the best of our knowledge. All right. And as we are just saying, if we can go to our next slide. So, volunteer fire companies also in this time decorated themselves, not really for fighting the fire, but when they were also on parades. So, they would have painted top hats and capes. And so this is kind of how they would, pride themselves versus other fire organizations. Um, and so the ones that you're looking right there, and so the gentleman with the top hat and the horn is the Vigilant Fire Company 1760 dress uniform, obviously taken afterwards for a picture. And then the other one down to the bottom right is the Hibernian Fire Engine Company #1 from Philadelphia, and that's them in all their dress uniforms. All right, let's go to our next one. All right, so this is another hand pump engine from a little bit later on. This is an 1839 James Smith New York style engine used in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And so at this point, you can see that it does have the suction sleeves at the bottom. Those are those two that's kind of in that little square that's put onto that picture. And so this would allow them to draw water from either a hydrant or a stream or wherever they could actually get water. They didn't have to use the buckets to fill it anymore, which is a great improvement into them actually fighting the fire. All right, if we can go to our next one. All right, so this is another one from James Smith. This is an 1853, another kind of New York style pump, but this one is huge. It's quite large. And to kind of give you guys a sense, and actually you can see that we are actually pumping that one in this picture in the bottom right. We do actually take that one out for our hand and steam show. And it is very fun to pump. It is also quite the workout. You definitely feel it the next day. To kind of show these engines off a little bit better, we are going to take another break from our slides and we're going to put it live here at the museum. We're going to take a look at them live. So we are looking at this, like I said, 1839 James Smith. This is big, beautiful yellow one, decorated, with all sorts of various colors. This one would have had a bigger turning radius. And then also, we have a bell over there to make sure that, you can hear when people are coming. Because we don't have sirens yet, but this purpose is the same. You still want to let people know that you're on your way to the fire so they get out of the way. Also, this one has a very large nozzle at the top. So while we have our suction sleeves, this one doesn't have anything for outgoing besides the nozzle at the top. If we take a look back over here, and step over here, you can see how big this other one is. This is the 1853 James Smith. It's huge. So it starts with the handle here, goes all the way back, all the way to here. Hi there. But yeah, so it is a very large piece of equipment. You can also see that leather riveted hose over here. This one has its own hose reel. That was kind of a cool, unique design. Normally, it was a whole other piece of equipment you'd have to bring with you, but this made things a lot easier. Also, once again, very large bell, so people can hear you on their way to a fire. And you heard me mention that sometimes they would bring the arms up. That would let them to travel a lot quicker and easier with their fire engines. All right, let's jump back into those slides. All right, so and then something else you can see with this that it's a little hard to see with the camera, underneath these very obscure parts of that 53 Smith, you can actually see these beautiful landscape paintings that they put on into the smallest part of the fire engine. And it's a little weird because nobody's really going to see how detailed they are until they get up close, which you normally wouldn't do unless you were actually working that fire engine or saw it outside of the fire.
Next slide.
Oh. Yep. So once again, sorry that these are the paintings that we are just talking about, which are on the James Smith, the 53 Smith. All right. Very good. Um, okay. And so the next one we are looking at is actually going to be our this is a Baltimore fire engine. This is that Philadelphia style engine that we were talking about before that was also designed by Pat Lyon. This one, while designed by Pat Lyons, um, other builders would sometimes just build on the same design, particularly after they passed. So this one was built by a man named John Rogers, who follows that Philadelphia style engine. At that point, this is in 1837, so Pat Lyon had already passed by that point. Um, and so he does that one. Um, and so, uh, yeah, as you can see, very tall, very long, very thin, and this would allow it to be perfectly used to go through um, alleyways to make things a lot easier. This one actually served in Baltimore. This was Baltimore City's fire department engine number 8. Um, actually, no, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Well, yeah. Okay. This one actually served in Babylon, New York. My apologies. All right. Um, so we can go to our next one. Okay. So this is the oldest steam engine in our collection. Manufactured in 1878 by Clapham Jones, it is a unique example of an early steam fire engine because it is hand pulled. So all of these fire engines so far were hand pulled, all the hand pump ones. However, we are moving forward in time. Our hand pumps can no longer reach the heights of new buildings as the buildings keep getting taller. So they have to start using steam as a means to get water all the way to the heights of these new buildings. So, with that in mind, they were still pulling them by hand, even though they're going to be pumping via steam engine. Now, as you can imagine, this is a lot heavier than a regular hand pump engine. But they hadn't quite figured out they were going to, how they were going to get to the fire. So they're still going to try to hand pull it. And as you can imagine, this didn't work out so well, as that they did not get to the fire quick enough in order to put it out. Um, but yeah, this one actually served in Frederick, Maryland. And then, as of course, very common, Vinny Vidi Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. This is actually a pretty cool piece, and that's on the loan to us from the Smithsonian. All right, let's go ahead to our next one. All right, so now we're going to talk about um, the end of the volunteer companies in Baltimore. So, um, to the right is a poster for all the Know Nothing political party of the 1850s. To the left is Mayor Swan, and to the bottom is the Election Day riots that happened in D.C. We're not quite worried about that one, but in Baltimore, there was a riot that broke out for the election. I want to say 1850, or at least somewhere close to 1850s, and that I'd said before that these volunteer fire companies had started to kind of embed themselves in local politics and that they also start to become a little bit rowdy. And so, to the extent that a lot of these local volunteer fire companies kind of became gangs. I know that sounds a little bit of a stretch, but it did happen, and that they would become political gangs. So, when this election happened, a lot of these volunteer fire companies started a riot through voter intimidation. And so, unfortunately, some people were killed. And what would happen is that a lot of these people responsible would run into their local, I don't want to say fire station because they weren't really fire stations yet, clubhouse essentially. They'd have all their other volunteer firefighters with them, and that the police couldn't really do much about it, that they didn't have the manpower to fight all these local volunteer fire companies. So when Mayor Swan gets elected as a result of this election, there's a lot of public pressure on him to remove these volunteer fire companies. And there's an example that was already set in Cincinnati that they had gotten rid of their volunteer fire companies and established a paid fire department that was organized by the city. And so there's enough pressure on him that he enacts that as well. And so what they do is that they take a lot of the better behaved volunteer fire companies in the city and incorporate them into the new fire department for the city, which is run by the city, and that you don't have any of this local politics or anything of that nature. All right, we'll go to our next one, please. Okay, so and here we see that we are getting into the horse-drawn apparatus. So earlier we showed you a steam engine that was still being pulled by hand. However, they quickly realized that they're going to start to use horses. Now, you may be wondering, why didn't they use horses to pull the other apparatus? Why were they still pulling it by hand? Horses do not like fire. And so they figured it was just easier to pull everything by hand. You would need all those people anyway to pump the fire engine and do other firefighting duties. But eventually, when we switch to steam engines, it's just too big and heavy to be pulled by hand in order to get to a fire at an appropriate time. So we start to use horses. And what they do with the horses is that they train them to be comfortable around fire, so that way that they're not going to, run away when there's a fire. But they also know how to respond to certain bells and calls in order to not be afraid. So we make our way into the horse-drawn apparatus era. But this coincides with the establishment of these paid fire departments. So we have steam engines, we have paid firefighters, we have horses. Now we need a place to put them all. Can we go ahead to our next slide, please? All right, so what you are seeing right now is the Engine 8 fire station, not in its heyday, but photos taken much later. And so this building was originally a fire station in Baltimore called Engine 8, which meant that it housed the Engine 8 apparatus for the city fire department. And however, they moved it in 1912. It was established in 1871. And so what they end up doing with it is putting a whole bunch of different things. But in the early 2000s, they had to tear down this building, and we were able to save the facade to kind of give us our own little firehouse and to preserve some of its history. So, Miss Emma, if you can stop sharing your PowerPoint for a sec, we're going to actually take a look at our Engine 8. So here is our Engine 8 house, and we have it set up to represent the original centennial because we're getting ready for the 2026, 4th of July stuff. But it's set up right now as if it would have looked in 1876, the first 100 years after the Revolution. But here we can see it has very large doors so the firefighters can get in and out with their apparatus. It has a call box all the way at the other end. So that way you can get the firefighters outside immediately. If there was a fire close to their location, this would bring the house on. But it's just something pretty cool that we get to have to preserve its history. We also have a light post out there. And so the reason for that is actually because this one's a replica. It's, electrical light that's meant to look like a flame in there, which isn't working right now. But the idea is that Baltimore is the first city with gas lights. And so that's why we have this one out here. But let's go ahead and go inside our Engine 8 house. We're going to go actually back into the slide like we do. All right, so one of the other major parts of this modernization of the fire department in the late 1800s and the early 1900s was the use of the fire alarm telegraph. So Samuel Morse was inspired by the sudden death of his wife while away to improve the telegraph as a means of more rapid communication. He had gotten a letter one day that his wife was sick, and then he got a following letter the next day that his wife had already passed. And so he wanted a more immediate form of communication so that other people wouldn't have to deal with something like that. So with that in mind, though, Dr. William Channing was the first to use the technology for fire alarms in Boston. He had realized, this telegraph system might be really good for telling the firefighters there's a fire, a lot more than just running and yelling and telling them. And And so they started in Boston, and it worked out very well. Um, and so other cities started to do that. John Gamewell and the right had purchased the rights to the fire alarm telegraph patents in 1849, the same year that Baltimore organized its new department. By 1890, Gainesville fireboxes had become the standard. We'll probably step into our fire alarm telegraph office a little bit more towards the end of our tour, so you can see it live because it's on the other part of the museum. But if we can go to our next slide, that is a little bit of what the alarm office looks like. Like I said, we can probably hop in there a little bit more towards the end of the tour. It's just unfortunately all the way at the other end of the museum, which doesn't work well for seeing it in person right now. So, but yeah, you can see various fire alarm telegraph boxes, as well as the systems that make it work besides the boxes. Our fire alarm telegraph office is kind of our precursor to the 911 call centers that we have today. Um, so yeah, all right, we can go ahead to our next one. So another piece of this kind of turn of the century fire apparatus was also not just electricity and telegraph machinery, but also chemicals. So this is a soda and acid chemical engine from 1868, which was good for like small communities. And then in a city, this could be good for either supporting a bigger fire or putting out a small fire. This is essentially a big fire extinguisher on wheels. Fire extinguishers that started to come around at this time, and they followed a similar action where if you think about your baking soda and vinegar experiment, that the two of those combine and that they create foam and pressure, and that's going to be used to push out water, which is in the bigger tank. So they're not spraying out chemicals, they're using chemicals as propellant to push the rest of the water out to put out a small fire. And the gentleman who made this one in particular, Charles T. Holloway, he was actually a very famous Baltimore City fire chief. He did a whole bunch of inventions and also helped to create the Baltimore County Fire Department. So he's very crucial to that as well, which is good for us. All right, we'll go to our next one. And so here you can see an experiment that we unfortunately no longer offer this program for kids because it was very messy. But it was something that we used to do for our kids' education, where they would actually make kind of a small, using the baking soda and vinegar experiment, their own little experimental, their fire extinguishers that they're going to use to put out the fire, quote unquote. All right. So now that we are getting into this, we're going to jump forward a good bit in time and go actually into our um, motorized period. So if we could go to our next slide. All right. And show that. Um, let's skip a whole bunch of that. Yep, we're going to go ahead and skip that one as well for right now. That's what I thought. That one probably got mixed around a little bit. My apologies. So, the Fire Museum keeps one steam engine. Oh, that's why that one was on there. Okay. Keeps one steam fire engine in working condition. This is an 1899 American fire company. It was used by the Washington Fire Company in Long Island, New York. The picture on the left is it steaming undecorated with its brand new boiler. The picture on the right is of Wayne Troyer working on the gold leaf scroll decorations on this frame, which was an amazing process to watch. Wayne has come back to help us finish another engine, which we're going to show you in a minute. But now we're going to go live for a second. All right, so this is that steam fire engine. We do actually pump water with this one as well for that hand and steam show. And so, very beautiful machine, very elaborate. You can see all the gold leaf work that's been done on here, as well as gold paint. Absolutely beautiful. So you have your boiler, and then we also get questions about these big domes. This is where pressure is going to build up to allow you to do that. And of course, one of the good things about steam for fire engines is that you don't just have to use bells in order to let people know that you're on your way, even though this did. You now also have steam whistle. And that was another good way to let people know that you're running on their way to a fire. Um, Now, these are when we're going to start using horses once again. However, for our modern day era, we use a forklift as our horse for this one. All right, let's bring it back to the slides for a sec. All right, so once again, you can kind of see us pumping away with this one. And then if we go ahead and just jump right to the next one. Here's a picture of our 1888 Clapham Jones steam fire engine. It served Baltimore City as Engine 14 during the Great Baltimore Fire of 1904. It is on permanent loan to the Fire Museum from the Baltimore City Fire Department. As you can see, it still bears the shield number 14, and this is a picture of it in front of the contemporary Engine 14 building, which is on Hollins Street. Now, Baltimore Engine 14 still exists today, of course, as a modern day fire engine company. And then, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, you guys may have heard of a couple of Baltimore City firefighters who unfortunately lost their lives uh, in a building fire, and that they actually belong to Engine 14. And so, in order to kind of honor them, we had draped the company engine in black, which is kind of a traditional thing to do for when firefighters have fallen from a particular company. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump to our next one. This is our 1898 Hale Water Tower, which also served during the Great Baltimore Fire of 1904. Here you see being pulled by a tractor, but it was originally pulled by three very large horses, um, but later received, like I said, a tractor because it was kept into service. Water towers held a unique place in history of the fire service after buildings grew to heights that exceeded the reach of the fire engines on the ground, but before ladder trucks had piping that allowed water to reach as far as they could. This would allow for you to get high pressurized water up to a very high distance. These kind of fell out of favor though because they're able to take ladder trucks and just kind of do the same thing with them nowadays. Um, so yeah. Um, the horse is Goliath with his holster Eugene Short. Goliath became a hero of the Great Baltimore Fire after he pulled this water tower to safety before the Hearst building exploded, which is where the fire started. The water tower was in service for a remarkable 70 plus years before it came to the fire museum. So it was always kind of kept by the Baltimore City Fire Department as like a backup piece. Um, the picture on the bottom left is a water tower in action at our steam show from 2016. We can go to our next one. So what you're seeing here is it's actually a children's book about Goliath that we sell here at the museum. Um, Goliath was somewhat burned as he narrowly pulled the water tower from the collapsing Hearst building. But like I said, it's kind of an interesting story with the Great Fire, and that Goliath's this kind of hero that comes out of it. Um, After the Great Baltimore Fire, and after the city rebuilds, so the fire happens in 1904, and basically it takes 2 years to rebuild the inner harbor. And so they hold this big parade, and that all the out of town firefighters who had helped fight the fire are welcomed back for this parade. And they have Goliath lead the parade because the story kind of gotten already well known at that point. Uh, all right, let's go to our next one. All right, so speaking of the Great Baltimore Fire, Great Baltimore Fire of 1904 takes place Sunday, February 7th. Um, and it won't be completely considered under control until Monday around 3 o'clock. The Great Baltimore Fire is a story that we tell a lot. It probably began when a cigar butt or cigarette fell into the basement of the John E. Hearst building that I was just mentioning. Dry goods were stored there in a highly flammable Excelsior, the packing material of the time. and the fire could have smoldered for many hours before an automatic alarm was tripped. Um, like I said, we talked about Goliath before. He was able to pull the truck from there. Um, the Great Fire is an incredible story of mutual aid and cooperation. 1,231 firefighters from 17 departments as far as Altoona, Pennsylvania, responded. Amazingly, um, there was only a couple of deaths during the fire itself, like two or three. For a fire of this size, usually you would see deaths in a very, at least triple-digit number. But because this fire started on a Sunday and downtown Inner Harbor was a business district, all businesses were basically closed. So luckily, there's not a lot of people around at that time to, for injuries or death, which is good. All right, can we go to our next one? Oh, so once again, this doesn't chat. So what you're seeing here is actually the example of a fireproof building. And so the building is intact, but you can see that the inside is absolutely ravaged by the materials that actually catch fire. And so this is a new technology, and the people who own these buildings, when they talk to their architects, were like, "Hey, you told me this building was fireproof." The architects would go, "Yeah, your building is still there." And there was a little bit of miscommunication. They thought that everything inside would also be fireproof as well, which obviously was not the case. All right, let's go to our next one. So here you kind of see the area in which the fire took hold. So basically, the inner harbor of the city. And they were really concerned about it jumping over into the Jones Falls area, but luckily that did not occur because then a lot of firefighters who were from out of town were actually lined up on the Jones Falls to pull water from there because their hoses and fire engines could not attach to the Baltimore hydrants. So they were sent to the Jones Falls to pull water directly from there in order to stop the fire from spreading into Little Italy. All right, so our next one. One of the other results of the Great Baltimore Fire is that they built a high pressure system for downtown that could produce 22,000 gallons per minute at 250 psi, utilizing special hydrants. And this is a pretty, that's a lot of water. A modern day fire engine only does about any 2,200 gallons per minute. So that's, as you can see, very high pressure, able to get a lot of water out very quickly. However, firefighting technology kind of outpaced the system, and so they took that system out in the 60s. I'm going to go to our next one. There we go. All right, so one of Norman Rockwell's famous Saturday Evening Post covers. The Baltimore City Fire Department used horses less and less until 1925, and that they were completely a motorized department. There was a lot of overlap between hand-drawn and horse-drawn. So that's why you would see stuff like we saw before that the water tower was originally pulled by horses, but then they put a tractor on it. And they ended up doing that for steam engines and a lot of other things like that. So yeah, all right, let's go to our next one. This is our 1908 Hayes ladder, aerial ladder pulled by a 1918 Mack tractor. This is, we refer to this as Truck 1, and it operates for special events like the Towson's 4th of July parade. But as we just mentioned, this would have originally been pulled by horses as well. So probably 3 very large horses would have pulled this, but to keep it in service, they just put a tractor on it. Next one, please. So kind of following that same concept, this is the actual steam engine is a 1905 LaFrance, which would later become American LaFrance. And but as later, 10 years later, they put a 1915 Christie tractor on there, which was added by the Baltimore repair shop. This is a very large steam engine. It can pump 1,100 gallons per minute, which is pretty good for its day. All right, if we can go ahead to our next one. All right, so what you're looking at that now is this is our fully operational, recently restored 1916 Mack fire engine. And so she was outside and pumping water for our 2016 to celebrate her centennial. It's been restored to its 1925 appearance, thanks to the photo above. This engine was specially equipped to serve in Baltimore's high pressure district after the Great Baltimore Fire. So this was capable of pumping some pretty serious water. And I had a chance to actually we've taken this out since then for our motor muster, and we were able to get all three of those turrets going, and that's a whole lot of fun to kind of stand behind those and direct those towards just open air. All right, next slide, please. So this is our showing the Mac there. All right, this is our 1920 Mac with a cab. This is a not really a fire truck, but it's a tow truck for the fire department. For repair shop number one. And so the idea was that this could do repairs for all sorts of other fire vehicles at the time. You could occasionally use this for actual firefighting, though. So the big winch, if you had a wall that had to come down, they could do it for that. And so they did that occasionally as well. All right, let's go to our next one. All right. So this is our 1913 Aaron's Fox fire engine that served in Washington, Ohio Fire Department until 1979 when it was purchased by a collector. So this was actually in use, or at least owned by that fire department for a long time. This vehicle is an early example of very early and experimental gas-powered fire engine. So they were trying to work with the idea of that changing from gas-powered fire engines from steam to using the actual internal motor to pump that fire engine. All right, so go to our next one. Uh, and actually, what you're looking at is that top one is that's once again our 1913 um, Aaron's Fox. So I apologize. That last one was not it. This is what it kind of looks like. Um, so once again, you have that front part, and what that front part is doing is that it's taking the motor, the power from the actual gasoline motor that drives it, and it's able to borrow that power to help it pump water. So, very good. Can we go to our next one? All right. So this is a 1922 Aaron's Fox model KSJ. This one could pump 750 gallons per minute. And once again, they're still working on this kind of system for using a gasoline motor in order to pump water. So that's why you have all these weird mechanisms in the front. Um, yeah. And Aaron's Fox was known as the Rolls Royce of fire engines because of the high level of the company's craftsmanship. Um, and then this one actually served in Baltimore City's fire department. This was called engine number 7. It's also unique for its right-hand drive, which made pulling up the fire to the fire hydrant a lot easier. Um, yeah, yeah. All right, we're going to go to our next one. This is our 1935 Stutz fire engine, which served in Havre de Grace, Maryland. Um, actually, if you want to skip one more for me, Emma. All right, this is our 1935 Stutz that served in Havre de Grace, Maryland. So now we use this for giving rides for birthday parties and parades and other special events. But it's always kind of an interesting piece to take a look at. They normally would not have those benches in the back. All right, we're going to our next one. All right, and this is one of our more modern fire engines. That is a 1949 American LaFrance that actually served in Ellicott City. And next to it, you can see a lot of modern firefighter gear, and that's where we kind of tell a little bit of fire safety when we're doing stuff for the kids. But you can tell that it has this engine 4 design, which is very common for both fire engines of the 40s and 50s. But it was actually, they eventually decided to go for a Cap 4 design, which we'll see in a second, which most modern fire engines are today, because they got in a lot of car accidents. With having the front of the engine so far out in front, it was really hard to gauge at intersections and doing turns. And so, like I said, they ended up in a lot of fire accidents that way. We go to our next one. and that this is a 1949. I forget the maker of this one, but this one served in Boonesboro, Maryland, out in Western Maryland. And so this one is a cab forward design. So the engine is either underneath or behind the cab in this one, which really helped them to make sure that they did not get into as many car accidents as I had mentioned. But also, you can notice that this one has a roof, which made their lives a lot more comfortable in general. Um, with that being said, it's kind of hard to tell from the picture, but there is no back. So the back is open despite it having a roof, which was just kind of an interesting design. We're going to go to our next one. So this unique vehicle is our 1947 Mack equipped as a floodlight wagon. A problem that some may not consider was the need to bring light to a fire ground at night. You would think that a big fire would produce enough light on its own, but that's not always the case. And then also there are other emergencies that the fire department helps with, which aren't fires, and so you may want light in general. Um, so this vehicle's 25 kilowatt generator powers the lights on the top and can supply electricity to other needs as well. And so the other picture is there. It's lighting up the Clifton Mansion during their annual Christmas lighting. We're going to go to our next one. This is the last in the slideshow, but I'm going to show you a couple live ones as well. This is our 1949 Mack. This engine served in Ridgely, West Virginia. We use this also for birthday parties and rides when the weather is colder because it is also a closed cab. The Bulldog on the hood is even ready with its turnout gear and fire helmet. And so, most Mack engines are going to have that Bulldog on them. We made ours a little firefighter. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go live and I'm going to show you a couple other things that did not make it into the slides. As long as everybody's still doing good for a time. All right. So right now, this is probably the museum's crown jewel. This is a 1920 Seagrave. And so part of the reason I didn't show it because the picture on the slides has it in a lot earlier form because this slideshow is a little old. So, but we finished restoring it. And so here you can see once again the beautiful gold leaf, which Wayne Troyer has done before. Beautiful depiction. Once again, this is pretty early for them doing the gas powered pumping, but instead of having that big stuff up front, they have it all right here, which helps. And this one served in Ridgeway, Pennsylvania. Like I said, it's just an absolutely beautiful piece. It can do 750 gallons per minute. And but yeah, but as you can imagine, it cannot go very far, or at least not very quickly, as was the case. So both this one and the earlier 1913 Aaron's Fox, both of these engines still run. We use them in parades. But the really cool thing about the Seagrave is that it still pumps water, and pretty well for its day and age. All right, and then the other major thing I wanted to show you guys was our alarm. Something very unique and very cool about this museum is that we have a working telegraph fire alarm system that includes the office. All the boxes throughout the museum connect to this office, and so they all make noise and do fun stuff. So the idea with the system was that if you saw a fire, you go to the closest fire alarm box, like 555, you would pull the fire alarm, and then you'd wait for the fire department to get there. So we're going to go ahead and pull box 555. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you have to lift up. So also we are punching holes that match the 555 on there. It's going to repeat this a couple times. Now, the whole purpose of the paper was that they could have a record to go back to. They would keep their records for about a month, and then they would end up throwing them out. Um, and the records were good in case anything happened, or if nobody was in the fire alarm office at the time, but that was a rare case. So the
I
next
forget to
step,
mention to our friends watching over the camera, there was a bell going off that we weren't able to hear to the Zoom muting function. So usually there's a dinging that goes along with that.
oh, okay, thank you, Emma. All right, so the next step is that we need to tell the fire alarm office that tell the firefighters that there's a fire. And so for that, we use our transmitter. And the idea behind this is that this would be at the fire alarm office and that this would send another telegraph signal to not just one fire station, but every fire station in that department. So they all know that a box has been pulled. So we're going to change it to 555, 555. We're going to make sure on our left dial, which we are, and we're going to send this out. And the cool thing about this in particular is that this is going to go to our watch desk right in there, but there's also one at the front of the museum, and so they'll get the same signal at the same time. And hopefully we can hear the bells this time, but we'll see. One, two, three, four. All right. So at the watch desk, the watch officer has a lot that he's got to do. First thing he's going to do is figure out where this box is. And by the time Baltimore took out the boxes in 1980, they would use they had over 2,000 of them. So instead of trying to remember 2,000 different places, they would use little cheat sheets. So this told us that box 555 used to live at Fayette and Utah streets in the city, and that all the fire engines that would the first do would be engine 23, engine 1, engine 7, engine 15, truck company 2, truck company 4, hose company 2, water tower 1, battalion chief 5, deputy chief 1 are all going to go to that box as soon as it's pulled. Very good. All right, guys. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
A reminder, if you have any questions, you will need to unmute yourself or type them up in the chat. So feel free to unmute now if you have a question.
Well, okay. All right. Well, Ms. Jassy, you still with us?
I am. Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope everybody had a good time, but that is just about the end of our presentation, unless we still have any last minute questions, concerns, comments.
I'm just so grateful for all of the hands. If you can't tell, we have a lot of cameras running. So really, Erin, grateful for you and the entire team at the Fire Museum. And where can we find you in physical form? Can you remind us of that location?
So 1301 Rear York Road. If you go to 1301 York Road, you'll probably hit the big office building, but if you go behind that, you'll see a very large building with a fireboat sticking out of it. And so that is where we are. And then we are open just for the remainder of August, Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 4. And then we go back to our regular hours starting September, which is just Saturdays, 10 to 4. But you can always reach out to us about private tours if that scheduling doesn't work for you. And then once again, if there are any grandkids, great grandkids, we do birthday parties here. We have a really fun playroom, which I did not include on our tour because it's good for playing, not great for history, but also very fun time, particularly if you have little ones who love fire engines or anybody who loves fire engines, really.
Well, thank you again. And thank you all for joining us on this virtual tour. Just a reminder, next month we're heading to the quarry where you're going to see some spectacular views. And we're going to talk about dynamite too. So please join us then. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. And thanks again, Aaron. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good one, guys.
You too. Take care.
Bye.